The rain hammered against the palace windows that November night. Inside the East Wing, Royal Guard Thomas Bennet stood at his post, watching shadows dance across the marble floors. He had served at the palace for 12 years. He knew every corridor, every door, every secret passage. But tonight, something felt different. It was 2:47 a.m. when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Footsteps, soft and hurried, coming from the restricted area beneath the palace. The underground storage rooms were off limits after midnight. Even the staff needed special clearance. Thomas gripped his radio, but hesitated. Palace protocol was strict. Report everything. Ask questions later. But something in his gut told him to wait. He moved silently toward the stone staircase that led down into the basement. The air grew colder with each step. His breath formed small clouds in the dim light. The footsteps had stopped. Now there was only silence, thick and heavy. Thomas reached the bottom and saw it. A door, usually locked and forgotten, stood slightly open. A sliver of warm light spilled into the darkness. Before you find out what Thomas discovered, if you love stories that pull at your heartstrings and keep you guessing, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Thomas pushed the door open slowly. The hinges creaked. Inside, the room was small, lined with old wooden shelves covered in dust. But in the center, under a single hanging bulb, sat Camilla, the Duchess herself. She wasn't wearing her usual elegant attire, just a simple sweater and jeans. Her hands trembled as she held a stack of yellowed letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. She looked up. Her eyes were red, filled with tears that caught the light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Thomas had never seen her like this. Not at state dinners, not at royal events, not in any of the carefully photographed moments that filled the newspapers. This was different. This was real. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't think anyone would come. Thomas should have called it in. Should have followed protocol." But something in her expression stopped him. This wasn't a security breach. This was pain, raw and desperate. He took a step back, giving her space. "Ma'am, please," she interrupted. "Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I need." He nodded slowly. She turned back to the letters, her fingers tracing the handwriting on the envelopes. Thomas could see dates written in the corners. 1989, 1991, 1994. Old letters. Preserved carefully, hidden away in this forgotten corner of the palace. Camilla's hands shook as she opened one. She read silently, lips moving slightly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Thomas had never felt more like an intruder. He started to back away, to leave her with whatever memory she was reliving. But then she spoke again. "Do you believe in mistakes, Thomas?" She didn't look at him. "The kind that follow you forever?" He didn't know how to answer. This wasn't a conversation guards were trained for. "I think everyone has regrets, ma'am." She let out a bitter laugh. "Regrets. Yes, that's a gentle word for it." She held up one of the letters. Even from where he stood, Thomas could see the elegant handwriting. A woman's hand. "These were written by someone I loved very much. Someone the world never knew about. Someone I had to erase from my story." Now, the palace suddenly felt smaller. The walls pressed in. Thomas realized he was hearing something dangerous. Something that could change everything. But he couldn't move. Couldn't look away. "Her name was Elizabeth," Camilla said softly. "And she was the only person who ever truly knew me." Thomas stood frozen. The name hung in the air between them. Elizabeth. He had worked at the palace long enough to know that names had power. Especially names that were never mentioned in official records. Camilla carefully unfolded another letter. Her voice was steady now, like she had made a decision she couldn't take back. "We met at boarding school. I was 16, awkward, trying to fit into a world that felt too small for me. Elizabeth was different. She was fearless. She painted, wrote poetry, laughed at things that terrified me." She paused, her thumb brushing over the faded ink. "We became inseparable. Best friends, they called us." But it was more than that. So much more. Thomas knew he should stop her. This wasn't his place. But something about the way she spoke, the weight of decades pressing down on her shoulders, kept him silent. She needed this, needed to say it out loud, even if only to a stranger in a basement room. The summer of 1989, Camilla continued, we spent 3 months in the countryside. Her family had a cottage in Cornwall. Stone walls, wild gardens, the sound of the ocean at night. It was the only time in my life I felt completely free. The only time I wasn't pretending to be someone else. She opened another letter, her eyes scanning the words like she had memorized them years ago. She wrote to me every week after that summer. When I went to London, when I started attending events, when the expectations began to pile up, she wrote about art, about books, about her dreams. And in every letter, she reminded me of who I really was. Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm was getting worse. Thomas glanced at his watch. He had been gone from his post for 8 minutes. Someone would notice soon. But he couldn't leave. Not yet. What happened to her? He asked quietly. Camilla's hands stilled. The letter trembled between her fingers. Life happened. Duty happened. In 1993, I met Andrew. He was charming, from the right family, everything my parents wanted. The engagement was announced 3 months later. Elizabeth came to visit me one last time. She closed her eyes, the memory clearly painful. She stood in my apartment, looking at the ring on my finger. She didn't cry. She just asked me one question. Is this what you want? And I lied. I told her yes. I told her I loved him. I told her we were just friends, that what we had was confusion. The word broke her. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Thomas felt his chest tighten. He had seen grief before, loss, pain, but this was different. This was a wound that had never healed, festering for decades beneath the surface of a perfect public life. She walked out that day, Camilla whispered through her tears, and I never saw her again. She stopped writing, stopped calling. I searched for her, hired people to find her, but she had disappeared, completely, like she never existed.
Oh.
Thomas stepped closer, then stopped. He wasn't sure what comfort he could offer. Maybe she wanted a fresh start. Away from the pain, maybe Camilla said. Or maybe she couldn't bear to watch me live a lie. She gathered the letters carefully, her movements slow and deliberate. I kept these hidden here for 30 years. Andrew never knew. Charles never knew. No one knew. This room was scheduled for renovation last month. They're tearing it down, turning it into additional security offices. These letters would have been destroyed. Lost forever. That's why she was here. Why she had risked everything to come down in the middle of the night? This wasn't just nostalgia. This was her last chance to say goodbye to a part of herself she had buried. I tried to find her again last year, Camilla said softly. When Andrew passed away, when I finally had the freedom to look without questions, I hired a private investigator. It took him 6 months. She looked up at Thomas, and in her eyes, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Not sadness. Not regret. Something worse. He found her, Camilla whispered. Elizabeth died in 2019, alone in a small flat in Edinburgh. She was an art teacher. Never married. No children. The landlord said she kept to herself, barely spoke to anyone. Thomas felt the weight of it. The tragedy wasn't just that Elizabeth was gone. It was how she had lived. Alone, silent, carrying her own secret until the end. There's more, Camilla said, reaching into her pocket. Camilla pulled out a small photograph. The edges were worn, the colors faded. She held it out to Thomas. His hands hesitated before taking it. The picture showed 2 young women sitting on a stone wall, the ocean stretching behind them. One was unmistakably Camilla, younger, her smile genuine and unguarded. The other had dark curly hair and bright eyes that seemed to look directly at whoever held the photograph. That was our last day in Cornwall, Camilla said. A local fisherman took the picture. Elizabeth kept the original. I had this copy made and hid it here with the letters. Thomas studied the image. These weren't just friends. The way they sat, shoulders touching, the way they looked at each other in the margins of the frame, This was love. Clear and undeniable. The investigator found something else, Camilla continued. Her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Elizabeth had a storage unit. She had been paying for it since 1994. After she died, the contents were set to be auctioned. He bought everything before it went public. She reached down beside her chair and lifted a worn cardboard box. Thomas hadn't noticed it before. She set it on her lap, her hands resting on top like it might disappear if she let go. Inside this box, she said, are 43 paintings. All of me. Elizabeth never stopped painting me. For 26 years, she painted the same face over and over. Different settings, different moods, but always me. The room felt impossibly small. Thomas could hear his own heartbeat. Ma'am, I don't think I've looked at every single one, Camilla interrupted. Some are angry, violent brushstrokes, dark colors. Those must have been from the early years, the pain years. But others? She opened the box slightly, revealing the edge of a canvas. Others are tender, gentle, like she was remembering the good parts, like she was forgiving me. She pulled out one of the paintings. It showed a young woman lying in a field of wildflowers, eyes closed, face peaceful. The detail was extraordinary. Every brushstroke carried emotion. This wasn't just skill. This was devotion. This one is dated 2018, Camilla said. 1 year before she died, she was still thinking about me, still painting me. After everything I did to her, Thomas didn't know what to say. He was a guard, trained for threats and protocols, not for this kind of raw human devastation. But he understood betrayal. He understood loss. She loved you, he said simply. That doesn't just disappear. Camilla's laugh was bitter. Love. I told myself I was being practical. I was young, I had expectations, I had a future to think about. I convinced myself that what Elizabeth and I had wasn't real, that it was a phase, a beautiful, impossible phase. She set the painting down carefully. But I've lived that practical life for 30 years now. I've played the role. I've smiled for cameras, attended events, fulfilled duties, and every single day I've thought about her. Every morning, every night. She was the ghost I carried everywhere. Thunder crashed overhead. The storm was directly above them now. Thomas checked his radio. Still silent, but his absence would be noticed soon. Questions would be asked. Why are you telling me this? He asked, why now? Camilla looked at him directly. Because tomorrow morning, I'm going public. I'm holding a press conference. I'm going to tell them about Elizabeth, about the lies, about who I really am. Thomas felt the air leave his lungs. Ma'am, you can't. The implications. I know the implications, she said firmly. I know what it will cost. My position, my reputation, possibly my place in this family, but I don't care anymore. I've spent 30 years protecting an image that was never real. Elizabeth died alone because of my cowardice. I won't dishonor her memory any longer. She stood up, gathering the letters in the box. The palace will try to stop me. They'll say I'm having a breakdown, that I'm not thinking clearly. That's why I needed to get these tonight. Evidence. Proof. Something they can't erase or explain away. Thomas's mind raced. If she did this, it would be chaos. The media would explode. The royal family would be thrown into crisis. Security protocols would change overnight. His job would become a nightmare. But as he looked at her face, at the determination mixed with grief, he understood. This wasn't about revenge or scandal. This was about truth. About finally being honest after decades of suffocating silence. There's one more thing, Camilla said, reaching into the box. She pulled out an envelope, newer than the others. This arrived at the investigator's office 2 weeks ago. It had been in Elizabeth's personal effects, marked to be delivered to me if anything happened to her. Her solicitor held on to it for 4 years, trying to find me. She held the envelope out to Thomas. I haven't opened it yet. I couldn't. It's not alone. Not in the middle of the night with 30 years of regret crushing me. Thomas stared at the envelope. You want me to read it? I want you to be here when I read it, she corrected. I need a witness. Someone who knows the truth. someone who can't be silenced if they try to bury this. She was asking him to choose between duty and compassion, between protocol and humanity. Thomas thought about his training, his oath, his career. Then he thought about the woman in front of him, finally brave enough to face her past. He nodded slowly. "Open it." Camilla's hands shook as she broke the seal. The envelope was thick, several pages inside. She unfolded them slowly, her eyes scanning the first lines. Thomas watched her face transform. The determination cracked, replaced by something softer. Pain mixed with relief, mixed with something he couldn't name. She read silently for a long moment. Then her voice, barely steady, began to speak the words aloud. "My dearest Camilla, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And perhaps that's easier for both of us. I can finally say what I never had the courage to say while I was alive. I forgave you the day you walked away from me." Camilla stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. She took a shaky breath and continued. "I was angry for years. I won't lie about that. I painted you in rage and sorrow, trying to exorcise you from my soul. But you were never a ghost I could banish. You were woven into every part of me. And eventually the anger faded. What remained was simply love, unchanged, unshakable." Thomas felt his own throat tighten. He had heard confessions before, whispered admissions in quiet hallways. But this was different. This was a voice from beyond, speaking truth that had waited years to be heard. Camilla's voice wavered, but she pushed forward. "I watched you from afar. I saw your wedding photos. I read about your charity work. I followed your life through newspapers and glimpses on television. And despite everything, I was proud of you. Proud of the grace you carried, the good you did, even if it meant living without you." She paused, wiping her eyes. The next part seemed harder. "I never married because I knew it wouldn't be fair. How could I love someone else when my heart had been yours since I was 16 years old? Some people are meant to love once, completely. I was one of them. You were my once." The words hung heavy in the small room. Thomas thought about his own life, his own choices. He had always believed love was simple. You met someone, you chose them, you built a life. But this was different. This was love that existed despite impossibility. Love that survived abandonment and silence. "I want you to know," Camilla read, her voice breaking, "that I don't regret loving you. Not for a single moment. Those months in Cornwall, those letters, those stolen hours together, they were the most real parts of my life. Everything else was just existence." "You were living." She stopped again, sobbing now. Thomas stepped forward instinctively, then caught himself. But Camilla looked up at him with such raw vulnerability that he moved closer anyway, standing beside her chair. She didn't acknowledge him, just kept reading through her tears. "By the time you read this, you'll be older. Perhaps you'll have found happiness in your own way. Perhaps you'll have forgotten me entirely. I hope you have. I hope you've built a life that brings you peace. But if you haven't, if you're still carrying the weight of what we were, I need you to let it go." Camilla shook her head violently. "No," she whispered. "No, I can't." "Please, my love," the letter continued, and Camilla's voice steadied slightly as she read. "Please forgive yourself the way I've forgiven you. We were young. We were scared. The world wasn't ready for us, and maybe we weren't ready for the world. You made the choice you thought you had to make. I understand that now. I've always understood it, even when I didn't want to." Thomas could see Camilla's hands trembling, the paper shaking. She was barely holding on, but she kept reading, like the words were a lifeline and an anchor at the same time. "I've left instructions with my solicitor. All of my paintings, all of these years of loving you through canvas and color, are yours now. Do with them what you will. Burn them, hide them, keep them. It doesn't matter. They were always for you anyway. Every single brushstroke was a conversation I could never have with you out loud." She turned to the final page. The handwriting was shakier here, written perhaps when Elizabeth was already sick, already knowing her time was short. "There's one last thing I need to tell you. One truth I never had the courage to speak. I hope knowing this brings you some comfort, though it may hurt first. In 1994, 2 months after you married, I came to London. I stood outside your house for 3 hours, working up the courage to ring the bell. I had a letter in my pocket telling you everything. How much I loved you. How much I wanted you to be happy, even if it wasn't with me. How I would wait for you if you ever wanted to come back. Thomas saw Camilla's expression shift. Shock mixed with horror, mixed with desperate hope. But I never rang that bell, the letter continued, because I saw you through the window. You were sitting in your living room reading, and you were smiling, really smiling. The kind of smile I remembered from Cornwall, the kind of smile that meant you were at peace. And I realized that my love for you meant wanting you to have that peace even if I wasn't part of it. Camilla let out a sound, half sob, half gasp. I wasn't happy, she said to the empty room. I was pretending. I was always pretending, so I walked away, the letter finished. I walked away, and I let you go. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most loving, and I would do it again, 1,000 times, if it meant you had even one moment of genuine happiness. Live, Camilla. Live for both of us, and know that somewhere, in whatever comes next, I'm still loving you. I never stopped. I never could. Yours always, Elizabeth. Asterisk, the letter fell from Camilla's hands. She sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. Thomas had seen people in shock before. Soldiers after battle, witnesses after tragedy. This was that same frozen moment before reality crashes back in. She was there, Camilla finally whispered. She came back. She was right there, and I never knew. The weight of it was crushing. 30 years of wondering, of guilt, of what-ifs. And now this answer? Elizabeth had loved her enough to let her go. Had walked away not from anger but from sacrifice. That somehow made it worse. Ma'am, Thomas said gently, maybe you should sit with this. Process it. The press conference can wait. Camilla shook her head sharply. No, this is exactly why I have to do it. Don't you see? Elizabeth spent her entire life protecting my secret. She died protecting it. She never told anyone. Never sold her story. Never tried to hurt me, even when I hurt her. She loved me in silence for decades. She stood abruptly, gathering the letters, the paintings, the photograph. Her movements were quick now, determined. I won't let that silence be her legacy. I won't let the world think she was nothing. She was everything. She was brave and kind, and she loved so deeply that it cost her her whole life. That deserves to be known. Thomas understood, but he also knew the reality. They'll destroy this. The palace, the media. They'll call it mental illness, a breakdown. They'll discredit you and her memory. You know how this works. Then you have to help me, Camilla said, turning to face him fully. You're my witness. You've seen the letters. You've heard the truth. If they try to silence me, if they try to make this disappear, you have to speak up. Thomas felt the weight of what she was asking. His career would be over. His reputation destroyed. He would become the guard who betrayed the royal family. But as he looked at the letters, at the paintings, at the photograph of two young women who just wanted to love each other, he knew he didn't have a choice. I'll do it, he said quietly. But we need to be smart. We need evidence they can't confiscate. Copies, backups. Camilla nodded. I've already thought of that. I have a journalist I trust. Someone who's been trying to get me to tell my story for years. She's waiting for my call. The moment I give her these documents, the moment I tell her everything, it's out. They can't stop it. She pulled out her phone, an old model she kept separate from her official devices. I'm calling her now. She'll meet us at her office. We'll document everything. The letters, the paintings, your testimony as a witness. By dawn, it will be published. The world will know. Thomas checked his radio again. Still nothing. But his shift supervisor would be doing rounds soon. They had maybe 20 minutes before questions started. We need to move. Now. They gathered everything quickly. Camilla packed the letters and photograph carefully back into the box with the paintings. She moved with purpose now. The grief transformed into determination. This was no longer just about her pain. This was about honoring Elizabeth, about making sure her love, her sacrifice, her life meant something. They made their way through the basement corridors, Thomas leading. He knew the blind spots in the security cameras, the routes that avoided the main checkpoints. It felt surreal, sneaking the Duchess out of her own palace like a fugitive. But that's what she was, in a way. A prisoner of her own image, finally breaking free. They reached a service exit on the east side. Rain poured down outside, the storm still raging. Thomas pushed the door open and checked the courtyard. Empty. The night shift was focused on the main entrances, not the delivery areas. There's a car waiting. He asked. Camilla nodded. 2 streets over. My driver thinks I'm at a private meeting. He won't ask questions. Thomas hesitated at the threshold. Once they crossed it, there was no going back. For either of them. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Camilla looked at him with eyes that had cried all their tears. What remained was clarity. I've been sure about this for 30 years. I just didn't have the courage until now. Elizabeth gave me that courage. Even in death, she's still giving me strength. They stepped out into the rain. It soaked them immediately, cold and relentless. Thomas led her across the courtyard, through the gates, into the streets beyond. They moved quickly, heads down, just 2 figures in the night. No one stopped them. No one saw. 2 streets over, a dark sedan waited with its engine running. Camilla turned to Thomas one last time. Thank you for listening, for believing me, for being brave enough to do the right thing. Not brave, Thomas said. I'm terrified. That's what makes it brave, Camilla replied. She climbed into the car and the door closed behind her. Through the rain-streaked window, Thomas saw her clutching the box of paintings to her chest. Then the car pulled away, disappearing into the storm. Thomas stood alone in the rain. His radio crackled to life. His supervisor's voice asking for his position. He had maybe 5 minutes before they realized something was wrong. Before they started asking questions he couldn't answer. He thought about going back, about pretending he had seen nothing, heard nothing, about protecting his career, his future. But then he thought about Elizabeth, painting the same face for 26 years, about love that survived everything except time, about truth that had been buried for 3 decades beneath duty and fear. He pulled out his own phone and made a call. To the same journalist, to give his statement, to become the second person that night, to choose courage over comfort. By morning, the world would know Camilla's secret, and nothing would ever be the same. The headline broke at 6:47 a.m. Royal Duchess reveals decades-long secret love affair. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Every news channel, every website, every phone screen across the world. The photograph of Camilla and Elizabeth in Cornwall. The paintings. The letters. Thomas's testimony as a royal guard who witnessed the confession. The palace went into crisis mode immediately. Phones rang non-stop. Security teams scrambled. PR advisors huddled in emergency meetings, but it was too late. The story was out. Authenticated, documented, undeniable. Thomas sat in his small apartment, watching it unfold on television. His phone had been ringing for hours. Palace officials demanding he report immediately. Journalists offering money for exclusive interviews. His supervisor, furious and confused, threatening disciplinary action. He ignored them all. He had given his statement to the journalist. He had told the truth. Whatever came next, he could face it. On screen, they were showing the press conference. Camilla sat at a table, composed but visibly emotional. She wore no makeup, no royal insignia. Just a simple black dress, and the only piece of jewelry visible was a small pin, a paintbrush, crossed with a quill. Elizabeth's symbols. I'm here today, Camilla's voice came through the speakers. Steady despite the tremor beneath, to tell you about someone who changed my life. Someone who loved me with a purity and devotion I didn't deserve. Her name was Elizabeth Hartley, and I erased her from my story because I was afraid. The room of journalists was silent. Cameras flashed constantly, but no one interrupted. This was history being made in real time. For 30 years, Camilla continued, I've lived a carefully constructed life. I've fulfilled duties, attended events, played the role expected of me. But every moment of it was haunted by the woman I left behind. The woman I told the world didn't exist. I'm done lying. I'm done pretending. She held up the photograph. The camera zoomed in, showing two young women, clearly in love, frozen in a moment of pure happiness. This was us. This was real. And I destroyed it because I chose acceptance over authenticity. I chose comfort over courage. Thomas watched as Camilla detailed everything. The summer in Cornwall, the letters, the paintings, Elizabeth's death, the final message. She spoke for 40 minutes, barely pausing, finally unburdening herself of decades of silence. When she finished, the room erupted in questions. But Camilla stood and walked away. She had said what she needed to say. The rest didn't matter. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Conservative commentators called it a disgrace. Royal traditionalists demanded her removal from all official duties. Social media exploded with debates, accusations, conspiracy theories. But something else happened too. Something unexpected. People came forward. Hundreds, then thousands of them. Sharing their own stories of hidden love, buried identity, lives lived in fear of rejection. Elizabeth's story became a symbol, not just of lost love, but of the cost of silence. Of what happens when society forces people to choose between truth and survival within days. Murals appeared in cities around the world. Elizabeth's face, painted from the photograph, with the words love, lived in silence. Artists created tributes. Musicians wrote songs. A movement formed overnight, demanding recognition for all the Elizabeths. All the people who loved in secret, who died unknown, whose sacrifices were never acknowledged. Thomas watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. His own life had imploded. The palace had suspended him pending investigation. His fellow guards avoided him. He was labeled a traitor by some, a hero by others. But he didn't regret it. Not for a second. 3 weeks after the press conference, Thomas received a letter. No return address, just his name and a postmark from Edinburgh. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Dear Thomas, you don't know me, but I was Elizabeth Hartley's neighbor for the last 8 years of her life. I saw the news. I saw what Camilla did. I saw what you did. I wanted you to know something about Elizabeth that wasn't in any of those stories. She was happy. Not in the way people expect, not in the loud, obvious way. But she had a quiet contentment. She painted every day. She fed the birds. She smiled at small things. I think she made peace with her life, even if the world never knew her name. Thank you for changing that. Thank you for making sure her love wasn't buried with her. She would have been grateful. Sincerely, Margaret. Thomas read the letter 3 times. It was the confirmation he needed. That this wasn't just about scandal or revelation. It was about dignity. About making sure that love, even love that couldn't exist in its time, was honored and remembered. A month later, a small gallery in London held an exhibition. The Elizabeth Hartley Collection. All 43 paintings displayed publicly for the first time. Camilla attended the opening. She stood in front of each painting for several minutes, studying the brushstrokes, the colors, the versions of herself that Elizabeth had held on to for decades. Thomas went to the exhibition on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The gallery was nearly empty. He found Camilla standing in front of the final painting. The one from 2018, the woman in the field of wildflowers. She saw me better than I saw myself, Camilla said without turning around. Every version she painted, even the angry ones, had truth in them. She never idealized me. She never made me perfect. She just saw me. Really saw me. Thomas stood beside her. What happens now? Camilla smiled, sad but genuine. I don't know. The palace has distanced themselves. My official duties are on hold indefinitely. I might never get them back. But you know what? I feel lighter than I have in 30 years. Elizabeth spent her life carrying my secret. Now I'm carrying her memory. It seems like a fair trade." She turned to him. "And you? What will you do?" "Figure it out," Thomas said. "I've had job offers. Security firms who want someone with palace experience, but I'm thinking of doing something different. Something that matters." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but I'll know it when I see it." They stood together in silence, looking at the painting. To people who had chosen truth over comfort, who had risked everything for a story that needed to be told. Outside, the London afternoon was gray and cold. But inside the gallery, surrounded by decades of love preserved in paint and canvas, something felt warm. Something felt right. Elizabeth Hartley's name would never be forgotten now. Her love would never be erased. And Camilla, finally, was free. Not free from consequence. Not free from judgment. But free from the weight of pretending, free from the lies she had carried for 30 years. Free to live whatever time she had left as herself. Completely, honestly, the way Elizabeth had always wanted her to be. The way love, real love, deserved to be lived.